Hello and welcome to the Healing Insight podcast, episode 8, with me, Sarah Hunt, and
And me, Jez Hunt.
hello, everybody. It's great to be here again. I can't believe that we're at episode 8 already.
I know time is going really, really quickly, and these recording sessions come around very quickly as well. It's awesome.
They do indeed, yeah. Um, so today, we did kind of say that we'd have a look at fear and what fear really is.
Oh,
So
yes,
this is quite an interesting topic because a lot of my work evolves around clearing fear for people. And to me, fear is false evidence appearing real. And so when you look at it from that point of view, it's about understanding that we're reacting to a situation where our perception is that something is very different to what it actually is. Does that make sense? And so we kind of get a bit stressed about it.
yeah. So I was just following your train of thought then, and just like, okay, does it actually make sense? It does. Just
Oh,
sorry,
good.
listen. Yeah, I mean, in my work as well, in coaching, I deal a lot with fear as well, and false evidence appearing real. I think many people may well have heard of that definition, if you like, of fear. I think I think you're right in that the what people are actually fearful of is an unknown outcome.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with
And
that.
maybe that's just a slightly different way of putting what you said. So what you said, but that's my slightly different slant on it. I think it's the same thing, but it's just a slightly different definition, a slightly different way of defining it, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Yes, it certainly sort of worry and anxiety around an outcome relating to something.
Yes.
And I've certainly come across people who've got a fear of fear itself, which is quite an interesting
Yes. Fear of
one.
fear.
Yeah, but that's the way that I intuit it, and
Sure.
it needs clearing. But I've also had lots of different fears that people have had, and sometimes you're not aware on a conscious level of these fears. And certainly, in my own experience, I go back to what I was telling you before about having been bitten by a dog last year, and I'm a dog lover, and I had no understanding until I got bitten that actually I'd got a deep fear within me of big dogs
Yeah.
attacking me. Until I got bitten, and then it brought that to my attention that it was something that actually needed clearing. And probably when I look back, um, the signs were there that I had some fear around big dogs, but I didn't really take a massive amount of notice of it. And so the universe gave me a big hello, you need to look at this, by me ending up getting bitten. So that's kind of an extreme situation, but there's a lot of fears, and one of the big fears that I have been clearing energetically for people over this last 2 years is a fear of death,
Mm-hmm.
and also fears around losing loved ones as well, which obviously has been triggered by what's been going on in the world,
Yeah.
um, and it's I do feel that a fear of death comes from the way that people perceive death and have come to understand with death as well, and when you come into an understanding that you are more than your physical body, that you are a physical being having a spiritual being, sorry, having a physical experience, then it's a lot easier to understand death as just moving on to a new part of the journey that you're on. But for many people, death is a frightening thing because they don't understand what it is. Where are they going? What's going to happen to them? Is it just a final thing? Does
Yeah,
that
and
make sense?
I think also, particularly with death, I think people don't talk about it. It's not, you know, it's one of those taboo subjects that you. It's a natural part of life. It's a natural part of, you know, whether
The
you're
cycle.
it's a cycle. You know, whether you're an animal, a plant, you know, any living creature on this planet will die, and move on to the next part of its journey. Whatever your beliefs are, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is that particularly with human loss, human death, we as a society don't generally talk about it. It's not the sort of thing that you just sit in a coffee shop and have a chat about death, is it? It's one of those things that
Not really.
you only talk about it when it occurs, when somebody close to you or close to a friend of yours or whatever, when it occurs in that environment, then maybe you talk about it.
Yes, and of course the process that people go through um, when they are approaching death is a lot of the time is a not very pleasant experience. And whether you're a relative, a friend, or whether you're the person experiencing that, and so that creates a lot of fear in people because they it's just not nice, is it? Um, so that adds to things. But there's so many other fears that people
Yes.
have. Fears of spiders, for example, fear of flying, and this in my work experience seems to have come from experiences in other lifetimes that get triggered. And we do need to do a session on past lives at some point. But I've certainly had experiences of clearing energies around lifetimes where people have experienced plane crashes, um, being shot down in a war, engines failing on a passenger plane, and then the plane crashing. And I've picked up those energies and cleared all the connections to that, and that has taken the fear away. So it seems to me that with fear, it can be lots of different experiences that have been negative experiences that have built up over a long period of time that then get triggered when something similar happens. And so it's like, oh my God, is this going to happen again?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just puts people in a stressed state, um, because they don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to repeat itself? Are they going to go through this experience that they had before that they kind of remember but don't fully remember, or is it going to have a different outcome?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's this, we're back to outcomes again, aren't we? Where it's like they don't quite know what the outcome's going to be, and so they end up very stressed about it. The thing is, as well, when people get very stressed because they're fearful, it puts their body under a lot of stress. So their adrenal glands start overworking. They start putting out lots of adrenaline and cortisol. They also will perhaps their pineal gland will overwork and they'll make a lot of melatonin, and then it kind of the body kind of stops making it because there's too much of it, and they're in a very stressed and anxiety, an anxious state, which then just adds to and feeds the fear with the negative energy that's there. So getting people to a calm state and finding ways of de-stressing is really important so that they can actually look at things from a calm state rather than from an anxious, stressed state. And then it's a lot easier to look at how to approach the situation and to overcome that fear. And there was a book, I can't remember the author, feel the fear and do it anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was written years ago, which was one of the first books that I actually read that when I moved on to my healing path and my spiritual path. And it was very much about confronting the fear and looking at what it is that you're actually fearful of, so that you can find a way forward through that fear.
Yeah. There's, I mean, there's a few other things that just sort of popped to mind. So if you look at in the work I'm doing with the coaching side of things, where I'm working with someone who has, say, for example, fear of judgment, and it might be that they've been judged by somebody in the past, but the reason they have a fear of judgment is because of that effect that that moment originally had on them, that imprinted on them, is triggered by, well, if I do this, someone's going to judge me. And it can be, and you know, it can be linked with things like not good enough, and those sorts of beliefs that they have. So it's not as simplistic as necessarily just the fear from a coaching perspective. But just because one person judged you once doesn't mean that everyone's going to judge you now. But because we don't know what that outcome is, because we haven't yet experienced it, we haven't come through the other side of it, then that's where the fear comes from. Well, what if somebody judges me? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
And then, to me, then that's flagging up to you, are you actually judging yourself?
Absolutely.
Are you
Yeah.
being too hard on yourself?
Yes.
Because actually, if you've got a fear of somebody else judging you, then you need to be going inward and looking at yourself and saying, wow, do I judge me? Do I judge other people as well? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, when I was younger, I know that I was very judgmental, and I didn't mean to be. Part of that was programming, I feel, that, well, or fixed false beliefs, what I call fixed false beliefs, which is kind of patterning and programming that comes, it's learning that comes from family,
Yeah.
friends,
Teachers,
colleagues,
whatever. Yeah.
whoever.
Yeah.
Um, and as I've come to understand myself better and done the healing work, I recognise that I was very judgmental at one time, and I remember in one of my jobs, one of my corporate jobs, one of the things that came out of a 360-degree assessment that was done. So one of those was like your manager would assess you, but also your immediate colleagues would assess you. And one of the things that came out of that was that I was very judgmental, and I was absolutely mortified that people saw me like that. Um, but it was a big wake up call for me, because it made me look at things and look at myself differently, and look at the way that I approach things, and look at the way that I communicated what I was perceiving, because I know I can be very sort of in your face, and to me this is how it
Really?
is.
Can't say
um,
I've ever noticed that.
and it's not that I'm intentionally being nasty or
Sure.
anything. It's just that I don't flower things up, and I've had to learn to flower things up a little bit, so that I'm a little more tactful with people, because you know, I just say it as it is to me,
Sure.
and it's my perception. um it's but then it's how the person that you're speaking to actually accepts that, because of their own experiences and the place that they're in at that moment in time. So I've had to learn to be a little more subtle, if you like, with the way that I um, give. Or it's not that I'm wanting to be critical or anything, but because I don't ever want anybody to feel that they're being judged or anything, but I want them to reach their potential. So it's learning to give constructive suggestions to help people to move forward, rather than make them feel that they're being judged, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big keys to communication, is the understanding that how you give information or how you give your opinion isn't necessarily how it's received by the other person. And I think this is a topic for another podcast, is about communication, particularly within relationships, and I don't necessarily, well, relationships with people, clearly, because you're communicating with them, but also within personal relationships as well. I think.
I do feel that this is why a lot of relationships break down. It's down to the communication and perception
Yeah.
between people.
So I
You
definitely
know,
think, I don't want to get off topic here, because I think we've
no,
still got stuff to cover, and I think that would be a really useful one to add to the list of ones we can do
I've made a note.
in the next few weeks, and just discover communication and relationship breakdowns, and or just discuss that topic and go around that topic and see what we come up with for that. I
Yeah.
think with fear, I think there are different types of fear. So, for example, if you're scared of flying because you're scared that a plane's going to come crashing down because the engine's going to fail because of past life experience or whatever your experience is or your reason for that is, then it's not like you haven't. Where am I going with this? What I was going to say was, so fear of judgment is something that you can look at within yourself. Fear of a plane going down, depending how you're perceiving that to be, isn't necessarily something that you're going to necessarily think of reflecting within yourself. Oh, so what do I need to look at me about a plane going down? I'm talking from a coaching perspective or from a cognitive, a conscious thought process of looking into it. Yes, we've got things like journaling and stuff we've mentioned before that could help someone get clarity on why they might be afraid of flying for that reason.
Yeah.
And which then leads me on to phobias as well, because fear of spiders, for example, mum was scared of spiders, as you know.
I'm not overly keen.
Okay, so there's so fear of spiders, phobias, then to a degree that's irrational, or is it? And that's what I just
Or is
want to.
it?
I know, no, I know.
Yeah,
I'm
I would
opening it.
say, or is it?
I'm opening it up here because I have, I'm not particularly brilliant with spiders. I won't kill them, and I will capture them, and the big ones and little ones I don't even bother about. They can just
No,
mooch
me
around
too.
and do their own thing. But something like fear of spiders is potentially learned behavior. If we look just in the maybe not so much from the healing energy side of things, but if your parents, as a child, if you see your mum leaping onto a chair when a spider scuttles across the floor, chances are you're going to go, oh, hang on a minute, mum's scared of it. It must be something to be scared of. So we can learn.
Yeah, that's just brought a memory back actually of not of spiders, but of I don't know whether you'll remember it, but of mice
In the
in the
kitchen
kitchen
with the broom,
with the
dad
broom
chasing
and
around
mum
trying to
jumping
get,
up on the chair
yeah,
and me up on the chair and dad chasing it
around the kitchen with
around
the
the
broom.
kitchen.
Yeah,
But it went up behind the kitchen cupboards, one side of the kitchen, and out it got around the back somehow and out the other side. Sorry, I digressed, but it yeah, it did make me uncomfortable with the idea of mice. And of course these were field mice that got into the house because we lived out in the country. But but yeah, sorry.
no, that's all right.
Um,
So
but that was probably a learned behaviour then as well. Was like, oh,
yeah,
you know,
so let's talk about phobias and so just like to explore this for a few minutes about phobias particularly. So something that people could look at, like fear of buttons, for example, is a thing. I know someone who has a fear of buttons. To me, in some ways you can look at that and be, oh, God, really? But I understand certainly with the work I'm doing with people, I understand phobias, and they are debilitating things. It is something that actually gets you at
absolutely.
a physical level. So, from an energetic perspective, what are your thoughts around phobias, particularly?
Phobias, to me, it's something that's happened in another lifetime that's been traumatic. So the link is that something awful happened when I was buttoning up my jumper, or I was buttoning up for using the button experience. Maybe it was a maid buttoning up something for her mistress, you know, doing the buttons on the back of a dress or whatever, and something traumatic happened. Maybe, I don't know, this is a bit of a wacky thing, but maybe a candle got knocked over and the curtains went on fire. And so the memory of that is imprinted in the person's energy. So they go to do buttons up on somebody else, that will trigger that memory of that happening. And so to everybody else, it is it doesn't make sense why this person would have a fear of buttons. But if they've
Hmm.
had something traumatic that's happened while they've been doing something with buttons, they might have been sewing buttons on a garment or something, and something happened. Um, then it seems irrational to everybody around them, but to the person, it's a real fear and it's a real phobia because they've got that traumatic imprint that is linked to that thing that they have the fear of.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Does that make sense? And certainly when I've cleared energies relating to things like that, the phobia's gone.
yeah,
So, but it's very real for the person, and but for the onlooker, it's like, what is their problem? But you can't make any kind of judgment about it because we're all on different paths and we've all had different experiences. And if we've had something traumatic happen when we've been doing something like buttoning something up, or um, I can sort of liken it to foods as well, having a phobia about a certain food or a food intolerance. That is often linked to something traumatic that's happened while the person has been eating that food at some point in time. Whether that's this current life or whether it's another life experience that they've had. And it will seem irrational to people because it comes from nowhere, and people kind of think, oh God, there's obviously something wrong with me, but it's just something that's very deep within them that they've hidden, because it upset them so much.
yeah, 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 yeah. Because our unconscious mind's just trying to protect us. So
Absolutely,
so we
yeah.
bury trauma.
We bury it, yeah, and some of it is, the really really traumatic stuff is buried very very deep, very deep. I find it very very deep in people, and it may be something that somebody else would think, well, that was nothing, but it depends on the circumstances that kind of surround it, and the experiences that they'd had previous to it. And you can have something that's happened in the life that you're experiencing now and that you're conscious of now, um, that is really traumatic, and you can bury that very very deep. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something from eons ago, that's deep in the energy. Sometimes it is, but it can be from their current experience that it was just too much for them to actually deal with. So they've compartmentalized it and shoved it away, but it's
Yeah,
to protect them, to keep them safe. But then something else might trigger that at some point, and bring up a fear or a phobia, or um, um, misunderstanding, or beliefs that actually aren't true, but it's just come from the experience that they've had.
sure.
So, and then that affects the way that they react and respond. And we've certainly we've touched on this before, where um, taking a step back to respond to a situation rather than just reacting to it because you've been
Yes.
triggered. Um, and so, if they've got something deep that then gets triggered, it then affects the way that they react to a situation rather than respond to it. And it will bring up that fear. And they'll feel uncomfortable, and they'll feel anxious, and they'll feel stressed, and they'll get that funny feeling in their tummy, and maybe they start breathing more shallowly and faster than they would normally, and maybe they'll sweat as well, and that's all their body just giving them an indication that there's something that's making them feel very uncomfortable, that actually needs addressing. But often it just gets pushed down again because they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned, just going back a second, you mentioned the book "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway," or whatever the actual title is, but and that's a way of reframing. Something we do a
Yeah,
lot in coaching is reframing situations, and we talked about right at the beginning of fear standing for, or one example of standing for, false evidence appearing real. And I know in previous discussions, the conversations that you and I've had, You had another couple of sort of variations on that from a reframing perspective might just help people just to take that
Yeah.
step back for response to look at what's actually going on. Can you remember what they
One of
were?
them was forget everything and run, and that kind of links to the flight or fight
Yes, definitely.
situation. And if you kind of forget everything and run, you're putting yourself in a space of
Safety.
safety, aren't
Yeah,
you? And
yeah,
then from that safe place of safety, then you can look at what was going on and find a way of dealing with it. But the immediate response might be that you need to do that. And then it was the other one, I think, was fake evidence appearing real. There was another one. I can't remember what it was actually. Did I
yeah.
write it down?
I
That's the
didn't.
thing. I think these were ones I'd seen on social media, and I thought, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at things, and maybe we need to look at it. But I've forgotten what the other one was. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. I mean, I think I think with anything like this, the important thing to remember is that the outcome, if you, it's the fear of the outcome, whether it's the plane going down, whether it's the spider's going to bite me, that's the fear, because that's what, it's the outcome that's actually more of a problem than the fear. The fear is just what we attach the fear of the outcome to, if that makes sense. Right. So, am I actually genuinely fearful that a spider, a little tiny spider, I'm not talking about a big tarantula bird eating thing with big fangs or anything, but a little tiny house spider is actually going to bite me? Am I actually genuinely fearful that the plane is going to go down? Am I fearful that I'm going to say this thing and the person standing opposite me or someone on social media is immediately going to jump on it and judge me? It's the fear of it rather necessarily than it happening, because statistically, none of those things or all of those things are quite low in terms of the likelihood of it happening statistically.
Yeah, but it's what the fear of it does. So this unknown, and it's really it's the unknown outcome, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is it? Am I going to be put in that situation again? And that's what you're thinking subconsciously, not on a conscious level
sure.
necessarily. Um, or is it going to be a different outcome? But it then puts the body into the stress state, and that's where it makes it uncomfortable for people,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, and where they feel fearful, and then it stops them from actually dealing with things properly and looking at the best way to deal with it um, because they're fearful.
yeah.
it's
So
it's
then,
really difficult, isn't it, to
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
use different words from fear. Um, but yeah, it's because they're fearful. Then it's like, I don't do that just in case something might happen.
Yeah,
And then it chips away at confidence as well. And
yeah,
that's one of
yeah,
the things I found. The other thing with people that are very fearful is that they often end up in negative spirals as well. And they're the way that they talk can be very negative. And of course, if they're very fearful all the time, their body's under a lot of stress all the time, that affects their immune system, and then that has a knock-on effect and affects their physical health as well. So looking at fears, um, it is quite an important thing to do to kind of get some understanding of whether whether there is anything really to be afraid of, or not.
yeah.
Um, so one of the things that people might find helpful, on my Peaceful Living website, on the things you can do for yourself page, there is a meditation for those of you that are interested in meditation and find meditation helpful, where you can look at your deep fears and do some healing work with those to help clear some of the energies around that, so that you can feel more comfortable about things. So that might be something that you might find helpful. Other people might find um, carrying crystals helpful, and certainly ones that you're drawn to, just to help calm you down. So, but things that come to mind are rose quartz, howlite. That's a real good calming one. Amethyst as well.
Yeah.
Three crystals that come off the top of my head that just to carry in your pocket or wear as a bracelet would be helpful for people if they're feeling very fearful and feeling very anxious, just to help their body to kind of calm down. But also it's that take a deep breath.
Yeah, just mindful breathing, just actually
mindful breathing,
conscious breathing,
taking that step back so that they can take a deep breath and then look at the situation and is it anything actually to be afraid of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then that book, I'll put the link to Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, because it's another thing that people might find useful. And as far as I know, you can still get it. And you know, it's just another perspective on how you can approach things that make you afraid.
Yeah, excellent. Well, hopefully the listeners have got some ideas of things, certainly in terms of possibly understanding a bit more about why they have fears, whether they need to journal and reflect on them themselves, or and some things that they can do with meditation, breathing, whatever, to help ease some of that while they then reflect on what they feel is the right approach to do. And there's things we can do with coaching, there's things we can do with healing as well, if they want to come and go down that route, a path as well. So I think fear might be an interesting one to explore again in the future. Maybe look at some specific examples. So actually look at specific fears maybe, and things that are quite common that people are struggling with, and give them a bit more of a direct approach that they can take if they are struggling with that particular thing. So
absolutely. So listeners, if you've got any particular fears that you'd like us to discuss and give tips on how you could overcome those fears, then please email us, and we will look at them in another session.
Yeah, excellent.
Super.
Well, time again, and I'm sure the next week will whiz round for the next one. But now again, another fascinating topic from my perspective with what I do and what you do from the what we do from the energy side of it as well. So
yeah,
it's interesting stuff. Okay.
Fabulous. Okay, until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.